Hi everyone, I would like you to complete the topic of the Challenge of Secularism for your reading week. So this video is designed to help support you through that. Please complete all the activities as advised, watching the links, etc., and making full notes as you would normally do when you're with me in the classroom. Right, let's get started. This is a good one, nice and straightforward with familiar names and people. So, the challenge of secularism. The question then is Britain secular? Do you think Britain is secular? What do you understand the word secular to mean? Now, a lot of students think that Britain is secular because of maybe the decline in Christianity. That is not the case. Britain's decline in Christianity is one thing. Secular means becoming less religious. That may not be the case because, as we've seen in previous topics like pluralism and society, that other religions are actually growing in popularity. But then on the other hand, the statistic that you can use that would support that statement is the idea that people are becoming more non-religious as well. So you can use those statistics to back that up. Secularization is a theory that links the decline in religion to modernization. The more modern society becomes, the less religion is needed. Do you think this is the case for Britain today? Jose Casanova, in Rethinking Secularization, identifies three ways in which people talk about secularization. The first is a decline of belief and practice in modern society. Some suggest this is a normal, universal, human developmental process. So, as we develop as human beings, as we evolve more in a modern society, there is less need for belief, practices, and religion. Maybe yes. According to the 2014 British Social Attitude Survey, more people do claim to be non-religious than Christian. He says the second reason is the privatisation of religion, where religion should be private and should not be seen in public. Maybe less likely, because actually there's still major national events such as Remembrance Day, which still involve religious organisations. And then finally, the secular separation of spheres of state, economy, science, which are free from religious institutions. What that means is that the main parts that make up our country are non-religious. Maybe no, because the Queen or the King now, that needs updating, is still head of the state and Church of England, and bishops of the Church of England do sit in the House of Lords. So we are still intertwined with Christianity because of the monarchy. The challenge of secularization, is it really the case? Steve Bruce, what a great name, is a sociologist of religion who describes Christianity in Britain as a pale shadow of its former self. I like that. Paul Keelis and Linda Woodhead, also sociologists of religion, identifies a growth in alternative spiritualities such as Buddhist mindfulness as Christianity declines. So she recognises that whilst Christianity is on the decline, other alternative spiritualities are still becoming more popular. In the 1960s, sociologists suggested that Western Europe would lead the way in secularization and the rest of the world would follow. However, the majority of the world's population still claim to adhere to a religion, and due to immigration, this has brought many new faiths to Britain. So actually in the 1960s, they expected and predicted that religion would go down and secularization would become more widespread, and this would then spread to other places in the world. That has not been the case. Immigration has meant that more religions have actually come to Britain, and the majority of the world's population still claim to follow a religion. Therefore, Charles Taylor in Secular Age suggests that the presumption that a government will be Christian and so will the state and the people within it has been replaced with a plural religious situation. So whilst we don't necessarily recognise ourselves with the government and the monarchy as Christian, we are still looking at more of a pluralistic society where there's lots of different faiths and beliefs. This means the number of people following Christianity may be decreasing, but the secularization of Britain is not happening due to the many other religions that are still being followed. So you then have a quote from Ludwig Feuerbach. We look at Feuerbach when we do religious experience. He's the one that says that religion is an illusion and a fiction people mistake for reality. Great quotes from him. He says, what yesterday was still religion is no longer such today. And what today is atheism, tomorrow will be religion. I really like that quote. What do you think? Obviously, there is a spelling mistake in atheism, but it still has the same meaning. What do you think he means by that? Can you put that quote into your own words? Can you put your own interpretation on that quote? I think it's a fabulous one. My interpretation of that quote is it represents that religion is fluid. Some days we're religious, some days we're atheists. Some days we're atheists, then we might be religious. And that this has been the pattern throughout history. And that religion is fluid. It adapts, it changes, it develops. So why do people need religion? That's the question. That's the question I'd like you to consider and think about. What is it about religion that means that it's existed since the beginning of time? We have always, since there's been human beings, there has been religion or belief of some sort. Why? Why do we need religion? So maybe just jot down a couple of thoughts and ideas. Why do people still need religion even today? From here, I'd like you to move into your first research task. The research task is surrounding our friend Sigmund Freud. You've got a good quote there from Sigmund Freud. Religion is the process of unconscious wish fulfillment, where, for certain people, if the process did not take place, it would put them in self-danger of coming into mental harm, being unable to cope with the idea of godless, purposeless life. Fabulous quote there. You could get so much from that for an essay. You could quote and say that it's a process of unconscious wish fulfillment. So unconscious means something we're not even aware of. You could say how people feel that if they don't follow religion, they're in self-danger, potentially of, eternal doom, or the fact that they're unable to cope with this idea of godless, purposeless life. So the idea that religion maybe gives us purpose, whereas actually we are just one human being in the grand scheme of an extremely long lifespan of the earth and really have very little purpose. So religion is something that we use to help cope with that, but actually what is on the other side? So that's a really nice quote that you can pick and choose bits on from your essay. What I would like you to research then is to create a fact file or just a page of notes, whatever works for you, on why religion is wish fulfillment, delusion and unhealthy. So what does Freud say specifically about religion? You don't have to go into the iceberg, you don't have to go into Oedipus and electoral complexes, none of that. Is specifically on religion this time. Areas to consider are, where do religious beliefs come from? Why do people need religious beliefs? And how can religious beliefs be discarded, as in got rid of? So research task for you all as your first activity. Moving on from here then, a few pointers for Sigmund Freud, but not enough if you haven't done your research. Freud believed that religion and modern religious beliefs are a delusion that exists to protect us from nature and fate. What nature and fate do you think he is talking about there? Is he talking about the fate of damnation, the fate that once we're dead, we're just dead, and that we are deluded in the belief there's an afterlife? Is that what he's talking about there? What's your interpretations of that? Freud argued that religion provides information that humans crave about things that cannot be discovered through the study of reality. So it's the idea the study of reality, science, for example, only gives us so many answers. There's many answers to questions that we crave that maybe religion satisfies, like why are we here? That idea that we need a purpose that maybe religion gives us. And so again, can you think of any questions that reality cannot answer that religion can help with? And you have a quote there from Sigmund Freud, the religions of mankind must be classed as amongst the mass delusions. Love that quote. Civilization, its discontent. This is the idea of just a mass delusion. We are deluded, and it's one of the ones that is across the masses. The masses, lots of people are deluded. Freud was concerned about the psychological impact that religious framed ideas have on the mind. He saw that religion was produced by anxiety about things beyond our control. So we create a divine force to replace this sense of uncertainty with something controllable. We can control God. We can control our ideas of God, what we want God to be like. So, for example, when you do the topic of nature of God, the very traditional sense of God was an all-powerful, all-knowing being that was quite transcendent from us, very much a Zeus character, whereas now we want the all-loving, omnibenevolent, always-present God, the soppy God that responds to our prayers and is there to guide and help and support us. That's because of the anxieties we now face. So we've adapted God, we've controlled this idea of God and religion to help appease the anxieties that we now have. Religion represses human desires, particularly desires that are destructive to society, such as sexual violence, theft and murder. Not sure. Think about countries where there isn't any religion. Does that mean there's more sexual violence, theft and murder? Does religion really stop you from doing those things? You could maybe find an example of somebody that is classed as religious but then has gone on to do those things. So is it really the case that it represses our human desires? You could link that, of course, though, to St. Augustine, who agrees that we need to repress our materialistic, greedy love and our original sin, and we need to focus on God's grace, etc. So that would support that idea that religion does try and repress these human desires. But I'm not convinced that's the reason why most of us don't do sexual violence, theft and murder is because of religion. Maybe traditionally, but probably not today. But this religious delusion is unreliable and unhealthy. And then you've got a really good quote there from Alan Watts. Alan Watts has some fantastic quotes if you ever want to research him. Real religion is the transformation of anxiety into laughter. That religion is actually such an immense support for people. So what I would like you to consider, potentially write down some thoughts, is but these feelings of vulnerability, of uncertainty, of helplessness, of anxiety that Freud claims are the reason people turn to religion, it becomes then an unhealthy delusion. My questions are these: is alcohol, medication and drugs a better alternative? Is finding God really that bad? And does logic, reason and or atheism comfort us more when dealing with these issues? So my question is this: if you do suffer with anxiety, depression, uncertainty, you don't know your place in the world, and yet, so you turn to religion, and religion really helps you. Think of William James. This is very William James-esque. You know, for him, it's self-authenticating. It makes them more positive-souled rather than sick-souled, more open to ideas and possibilities. Is it really bad if that's what God and religion brings to you? Why is people that turn into alcohol or medication or drugs acceptable within society? Or maybe not acceptable, but religion is the one that we really attack. Religion is the one that's seen as really unreliable and unhealthy. Is that fair? Is religion as bad as those? Is the ones that are better than others? And so I just wanted you to consider the bigger picture of the coping mechanisms that people use. Is religion really that bad if people want to use it as a coping mechanism? I then would like you to research the Atheist Bus campaign. What was the campaign about? How was it received in society? What is interesting about the wording on the advert of the bus? There's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. So what was it in response to? So it was the young lady there that started the campaign. Of course, Richard Dawkins was all over it. He could not have a campaign like that and not be part of it. So he more gate crashed it than was instigating of it. Find out about how much money they raised and where did the money go to. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to compare it with religion, especially Christianity. So Christian, like Oxfam, Christian charities like Oxfam. How much money did they raise and where did they put their money? How much money did this campaign raise and where did the money go to? And so again, compare it. So how was it received in society? What do you think the point of it was? Just have a little bit of a research. It's quite a good one, is that one. Bit more Richard Dawkins. Somebody else must be responsible for my well-being, and somebody else must be to blame if I'm hurt. It is it is similar infantilism that really lies behind the need for a God, in the God delusion, infantilism, and childish behaviour. So what he's saying is that we constantly put our well-being, our hurt onto God. We're constantly looking to God for these things. But the question is that really God's fault? Is that really God's fault? Like when there's a problem of evil, I always ask the students, is it God's fault for evil? Why should God be the one that intervenes in the Holocaust when it was us doing things to other people? Why was it God's place to intervene? And so is it religion and God's fault that we constantly blame it? Or is it humanity? Is it us that has the issue? Is it God's fault that human beings point the finger and need to blame someone or something else for things such as the problem of evil? And if God, religion didn't exist, would humanity just find someone or something else to blame? So he's saying that we look to somebody else, and so we have that need for God. But if God didn't exist, if religion didn't exist, would we find something else to create to blame? Because it's easier to blame something else than blame ourselves. What do you think? I also want you to look at his t-shirt. Religion, together we can find the cure. Now, I often get the students to discuss this and see what you think about it. What are your thoughts on that t-shirt? Religion, together we can find the cure. Now, I think that's quite an offensive t-shirt. And of course, that's his aim. He aims to be as outrageous as possible. If I hadn't have said religion, what other word do you think would work with together we can find the cure? What do you think normally goes with that catchphrase? I think potentially the word cancer. Cancer is one that I think goes, cancer, together we find the cure, we can find the cure. That fits more likely. Now, maybe I'm looking into this too much. I often do. But he's changed the word to religion. Is he saying that religion is like a cancer? Probably is, knowing Richard Dawkins. So what is he doing with that? Is he trivializing cancer? Is he attacking religion? Do you think it's fair that he wears a shirt, obviously just a t-shirt, that's all it is, but do you think it's fair that he's focusing on something like that? Do you think religion is something that we can find the cure for? Do you think that's fair? So again, you can always use that as a quote once more, linking it into the kind of things that he says. So what do you think about that? Dawkins versus religion. Dawkins thinks life should be meaningful without reference to religion. I think Dawkins should mind his own business, but that's just me. He's made a lot of money from attacking religion. The human need for God is infantile, childlike, and an adult should be able to find meaning in life from other sources than religion. Is this really fair? Is it fair that if you believe in religion, so all the millions of people in the world that turn to religion, they're like children, they're childlike? Do you think that's fair? Religion, he says, is repressive, such as religious dress codes. So he goes after and attacks the burqa, for example. The burqa, he says, these not only ensure female submission, but it's also a metaphor for reducing our ability to perceive and understand things. So he thinks the burqa is a way of female submission. Now, the question is, and this is something that you will look at when you do gender and society and gender and theology, is it religion's fault that that's the impression it gives? Or was it the patriarchy? Was it the male-run society that enforces? Because there's nothing in the Quran that talks about women having to cover themselves from head to foot. It talks about being respectful. And so this idea that the burqa is necessary, the niqab is necessary, is that a religious thing? Can you back up the religious connotations? Or actually, is it more of a patriarchy? Again, is religion the problem here, or is it society? All I'm doing here is I'm giving you different layers to consider to help you develop your line of argument, and you can go down any argument you would like. You might think Richard Dawkins is absolutely spot on, brilliant, argue it. You might, however, think he's unfair. I then would like you to watch this clip. Just type in things not to say to someone who wears a burqa and it'll come up on YouTube. A really, really good clip where women are talking about their experiences with wearing the hijab, which is the scarf, the niqab, which was with the eyes, and the burqa is the full covering. Moving forward then, the indoctrination of children. According to Dawkins, religion is something that everyone needs to escape from. He is most concerned about how children are hijacked by religious faith, causing them harm. He uses extreme examples to illustrate his point in his book, The God Delusion, such as sexual abuse, Irish nunneries, and kidnapping and false baptism. Now, I've read The God Delusion. It is worth a read. It's immensely arrogant, but that kind of goes with Richard Dawkins. Within the first few pages, it says how by the end of the book, if you are Christian at the start, you won't be a Christian by the end. And he is convinced that he will turn you against God. Now, my argument is always this. If you know you are right, if you know that the points you are making are true, why use extreme examples? So, for example, doctors and science. They don't use extreme examples, they just use facts. Now, I know that they are facts. There was immense abuse within Irish nunneries. Women that got pregnant were sent to Irish nunneries and had their babies taken off them. I know that there's been immense amounts of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church that have been historically documented. Kidnapping and forced baptism, not so sure where he's getting that one, but I'm sure he'll back it up with one account that happened one place, one time. My point is that these are extreme examples to make. It's like using paedophiles to make your point. When you use extreme examples, of course people are going to agree with you, because that's the whole point of using them. And yes, they are facts, so maybe he's right to bring our attention to that. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't mention, obviously the God Delusion is quite a fair few years old now, so it won't have happened at the time, but the current Pope, Pope Francis, for example, has recognised the sexual abuse now and is doing an awful lot to try and counteract the future of this not happening again. He can't do anything about the past other than recognise it and put in support for those people, but he's changing it for the future. And obviously, does Dawkins ever recognise these things? He argues that children before the age of consent, so that's 16, 18, being considered religious, e.g. to enter some schools, is a form of long-term psychological abuse. Now, what you've got to ask yourself is this. Did you go to a Christian primary or secondary school? Would you class your parents putting you in those schools as long-term psychological abuse? Do you feel that you are going to be psychologically scarred, potentially for the rest of your life, because you went to those schools? Because that's what he's implying there. And at the end of the day, children before the age of consent going to a religious school, well, that's why you have your parents, because they have to make the decisions for you before the age of consent. And fair enough if you do see it as long-term psychological abuse, but then isn't a lot of things your parents' decisions that they make for you maybe also classed in the same way? So parents make a lot of decisions for their children, that's the whole point. They all can impact you in both positive and negative ways. Again, he's purely focusing on that one. Dawkins quotes Nicholas Humphrey's Amnesty International 1997 lecture where he says, in short, children have a right not to have their mind addled by nonsense, and we as a society have a duty to prevent them from it. So, does that mean that we don't talk about Santa Claus? Because we're addling their minds with nonsense. Does that mean we don't talk about the Tooth Fairy, that we no longer put money under our pillows? Does that mean that we don't have an Easter bunny that brings Easter eggs? At what point do you stop? Isn't the whole point of childhood? And yes, I know I'm comparing Christianity to Santa Claus, which again can be seen as a negative thing. But my point is that don't we as parents always try and influence our children? Don't we always try and say, what the different things are? Why opening their minds up to potentially religion? Why is that necessarily something that's wrong? So that they at least have an option or an opportunity to learn it. They have a right not to have their minds addled by nonsense. But what's classed as nonsense? Why not? Do you think it's acceptable to bring children up as atheist? So do you think that Richard Dawkins had an open household, for example? Do you think that his children were shown many different perspectives so they could make their open-minded view on them? Or do you think they were brought up completely atheistic? Do you think that they were, if they'd even mentioned religion, they'd have been, the views would have been squashed? So is that not the same? Is that by forcing children against their consent to go to a religious school, you're not doing the same by promoting your atheism to your children, for example? Do you think Dawkins is accurate when he says religion is a form of psychological abuse? Why do you think Humphreys calls religion nonsense? I'm sure Freud and Feuerbach agree with that as well. And do you think it's necessary to use extreme examples to make a point? So again, all I'm doing is I'm trying to get you to view it from different angles so that you don't just accept what's been saying here, that you question it, that you look at it. Is Christianity then a major cause of personal and social problems? Yes, let's blame Christianity. Christianity can be seen as having a negative influence on society. It can do. So we'll look down these views first. According to Dawkins, Christianity has played a part in the criminalisation of homosexuality and anything else that differs from moral absolutes. Yes, it has. Christianity, at the end of the day, many people in the KKK were Christians, that it has been a massive part of the legal system over the years, that it has led to the criminalisation of things like homosexuality, and so there is links there between Christianity and the views that we've had on things like homosexuality, the roles of women, etc., and anything that differs from moral absolutes. It continues that it has negative influence on the sanctity of human life and attempts to restrict women's access to abortion and contraception. Now, I rarely agree with Dawkins. He's not that wrong with this part. Now, it hasn't had a direct correlation between Christianity and these things, but there is certainly a negative influence there. So I agree with him there, that the sanctity of human life, this is the idea that all human life is sacred to the point where women couldn't access abortions. Look at what's happening in Texas with the idea that women are restricted from having an abortion, or that women were allowed contraception for many years. So there has been a negative influence that Christianity has had on views like this. E.g., when George Bush was governor of Texas so many years ago now, he oversaw a third of executions, the death penalty, in the USA at the time, whilst preventing medical advancements in the use of embryonic life. So there was huge hypocrisy in what George Bush was promoting. Like, there's huge hypocrisy in Texas currently. Women can't have abortions, but they still allow for capital punishment. How does that work? How do you still have the death penalty but then stop women from having abortions? When, if life is sacred, life needs to be sacred. You can't have it one way and not the other way. So he allowed for a third of the he oversaw a third of the executions in the USA at the time, but he prevented medical advancements. So that's things like stem cell research using embryonic life. So an embryo is a fertilised egg, often used within IVF. And in IVF, you don't always use all of your eggs. So you have fertilised eggs, which are life. They are potential life because the egg and the sperm has met. So if you implant it in a woman, chances are it might grow. But those that get left behind and aren't used, they are full of stem cells. They are an absolute. They can be used in stem cell research. They can be used to find out so many medical advancements. He would not allow them to be used. He prevented any medical advancements using the leftover embryos because, again, life is sacred. However, the difficulty of using multiple examples is when a generalisation of the whole faith is made. Why ignore other examples? So, e.g., in the 19th century, churches established schools for the poor, or civil rights activists such as Martin Luther King Jr., who had a leading role in the challenge of segregation. Many critics use the most extreme examples, while Christianity could be seen as representing the everyday behaviours that are often overlooked, such as charity work, hospice support, or food kitchens. So, my point there is this. Dawkins is not wrong in the examples that he uses. Dawkins is not wrong in saying that Christianity has had a negative effect in certain ways. My issue is it's always a very, very unfair, one-sided argument. And that's his whole point, though. I know that he doesn't have to say the other side. But it leaves his argument lacking then. It shows that his argument I think better arguments are where you recognise these things, but then counteract them again. He never recognises the things that Christianity actually does. And so people forget. People listen to the big mouth that is Dawkins, the one that shouts the loudest, but people ignore Christianity and the things that they do because they don't shout about it. They just get on with it and do it. How much money has Dawkins, out of the millions he's made, how much has Dawkins donated to help people? I don't actually know the answer to that, but I imagine not very much. Dawkins uses it to buy himself nice new big houses. So, you know, where as a Christian, you know, how many food kitchens has Dawkins helped at? How much hospice support has he done? How much, you know, charity work has he done? How much money has he donated? And so my point is this: I'm not expecting Dawkins to have done these things, but stop criticising people that do, as in Christians. Yes, there can be extreme Christians like the Westboro Baptist Church who are horrendous individuals in society. But that's 1% of Christianity. The Roman Catholic priests that did those horrible things was 1% of them. Obviously, I'm not giving an actual statistic, it might be more than that. But my point is that it's a small amount compared to the masses of Christians worldwide that either do amazing things or just go through their life living as good human beings with Christianity adding to that. So my point is, don't ignore the amazing things that the Christianity has done as a counter argument. So the research test that I would like you to do next, I would like you to look into Jo Marchant, who is a science journalist, and she found compelling evidence to show how religion and belief are actually the source of well-being. What does her research show? Find a quote from her work and put it in your own words, and then can you link what she says once more to William James as a nice extra synoptic link there? The question then is, should Christianity play no part in public life? Secularity means the absence of church or religion in government and state. This means the absence of religious involvement in the government and public matters. The separation of church and state is found in countries such as France, Turkey, and surprisingly the USA. The USA, even though predominantly Christian and quite open about their Christian views, they keep their church and their state matters separate. The key idea is that religion should have no bearing or influence on the public world. It is not that governments are neutral in matters of religion, but any decision that affects public matters, laws, state-funded schools, are based on democratic and non-religious foundations. The separation of church and state can also be seen in the seem to bubbling under the surface in the UK as well. We are still combined. As we said, we are classed as a Church of England country still, and linked in with the monarchy, etc. So we are not separate, but this might change. So let's have a look. What I want you to first of all consider your answers to the following questions. People should be allowed to wear religious symbols and follow religious dress codes at work. Do you think this is allowed? Do you think people should be able to wear the religious symbols? Do you think they should be able to wear the hijab, the niqab, the burqa if they were in a religious if they were in a work environment? Do you think so? For example, if you went into a bank, do you think it's acceptable for a woman to wear a burqa? Do you think burqas are acceptable to wear them teaching in schools, for example? What are your views? People have the right to assert their religious beliefs when running a business. So do you think that businesses should be able to have their religious beliefs have impact on that business? Or do you think they should keep their businesses and their religious views separate? And should religion play a part in education? Should children be made to do religious education? Do you think that they should be kept separately? Do you think children should have assemblies? Do you think they should sing hymns? And then I would like you to look into two legal cases. These are really good. You have the Eduarda versus the UK and Lee versus MacArthur in 2013 and 2016. So I need you to look into these two cases. They're really good. Follow them all the way through as well. What happened? What are the deciding factors? And please write down some notes on each of them. Education and religion then. What are the strengths and weaknesses of religious schools? So I'd like you to write a list of what is good and what is bad about religious schools. And then, should society abandon religious schools completely? Should we no longer have religious schools? The British Humanist Association campaigns against schools with religious character, saying we aim for a secular state guaranteeing human rights with no privilege or discrimination on the grounds of religion or belief. But this idea that we should therefore not have schools that show no privilege or discrimination, does that mean we should also get rid of private education? Does this mean that, what about privilege based on grounds for paying for education? Is that therefore more acceptable than religious, or should we also get rid of those institutions as well? Humanist society also continues by saying that young people of all different backgrounds and beliefs can learn with and from each other. So do you think that that doesn't happen in religious schools? Do you think that young people do not learn about other people from different backgrounds and beliefs when they are in religious environments? Dawkins adds that religious schools replace evidence-based approaches to understanding our world with superstitions. He argued that teaching evolution alongside other theories such as creationism in science classes fails to credit the evidence of evolution. Now, for those of you that went to a religious school, a Christian school, for example, did you learn creationism in science with evolution? Where did you learn about creationism and evolution? Was it within science classes? Because historically, when I've asked the students that, they've said no. They've said that, let's just change that. They've said that they did not learn creationism in science classes. So I'd be very interested to know what Dawkins is basing that on. Which school taught it alongside evolution in science? Again, was it just one school that he found, so therefore makes that argument? Because historically over the years, I've had many students that have been to a Christian school and they have not learned that in science class. Do you know anyone who was taught creationism alongside evolution in science? Defending religious schools then. The question is, are children from separate schools less open-minded as some might wish to claim? So separate schools as in religious schools. Are children that have grown up in religious schools, are they less open-minded? Are they more indoctrinated, as Dawkins says, towards that belief and only that belief? Well, Professor Leslie Francis was a researcher at Warwick Religions and Education Unit at the university, found evidence to suggest that young people who are committed to Christianity are actually more open-minded to people of other faiths. So you've got your interfaith dialogue links there as well, and beliefs not less open. This is because it is not the school that impacts attitudes, but the students themselves. And so it's the idea that it does not matter about the institution you go to, it's about the student and who you are. You are open-minded because you're an open-minded individual. You are a closed-minded because you're a closed-minded individual. This has no link to the school that you go to, whether it's a religious school or a secular school. Charles Taylor also says that there should be a recognition that societies are increasingly multicultural. No culture, including an atheist one, should impose itself on others because this causes minority cultures to diminish. Again, do you agree? What would Dawkins say to this? Should having atheist schools, as in schools that do not promote any religions, do you think that's a good idea? Do you think schools should not mention religions or anything at all? Or do you think that actually might be quite detrimental and damaging? Further arguments defending religious schools, you have Christopher Dawson, whose essay in The Challenge of Secularism argues that secular education is actually problematic. Dawson points out that where education systems were consciously anti-religious, meaning deliberately avoiding religion, this happens actually in communist countries, and that religion therefore becomes endangered. Should we be more like a communist country where we do not promote any religion within schools, where we do not have religious schools? Should we close religious schools? Removing religion from culture, art, architecture, music not only deprives religion, but also people who are trying to make sense of their own culture. Would you like to see culture and art and architecture not have any religious links or religious connotations? Do you think that deprives us as a society of these things as well, of that option? Professor James Conroy argues that religious schools have an important role in a liberal democratic state. They provide parents with a choice and provide counterbalance to any single driving influence on education, that being secular, or the atheistic single driving influence. And so what he's saying is it gives parents the choice. Yes, as Dawkins would then say, is that choice then means that they might indoctrinate and psychologically abuse their children by putting them in religious schools. But is that the case? How many of you went to a Christian school because actually it was just the best school in the area? not because you are particularly a Catholic family or a Christian family or whatever denominational school it might be? Is it because it's just the best school in the area? Do parents choose schools because of that religious link, or is it actually, do they pick schools because they want the best education for their child? Often you will find that religious schools are actually very, very good educational institutions. Government and religion. Should the government make laws that impact religion, such as laws to remove religion from the public space? So, for example, if we want to separate government from religion, then should the government get involved in things like banning the hijab, like in France? Yet state and government and state and religion are separate, yet government has impacted on religion. Is that fair? If religion can't impact on government, then it shouldn't work the other way around either. Can you think of any recent examples of this? So again, I am wanting you to consider the ban of the hijab potentially as an example, but can you think of any others where the law has impacted religion? I would like to read the article and make notes about the ban in the burqa in Britain. You'll find this in your reading packs, in your yellow packs. But for anybody else, you can find it online if you just look at any newspaper articles about the banning the burqa in Britain, and how, for example, the account that I get my students to read is in France, I think, where a woman is on the beach and she's wearing burkini, so she's just kind of covering her body. She basically looks like she's wearing a wetsuit, and where the armed police made her remove it publicly, and the amount of threatening behaviour that the police showed towards her, when all she was doing was she was minding her own business, she was on the beach, and she was just dressed appropriately and conservatively, and they really went to town on her. And it's a very, very interesting article, but the way that they treated her was awful. Some argue that government should be entirely separate, as a Church of England state ignores the many other faiths and beliefs in Britain. This links back to the quote from Pluralism and Society, where Charles said when he becomes king, he's going to no longer be the defender of the faith, meaning Church of England. He's going to be defender of faith. And so he's going to try, potentially, we'll see if he does, but to make a more recognition of the other faiths in Britain. However, other faiths are not excluded from the House of Lords, for example. There's a chief rabbi for Jews, there's a Duke of Norfolk for Catholics. What about doctors? Doctors who do not want to carry out procedures because of religious beliefs. Do you think a doctor, if he's a Christian, should have to carry out an abortion? Do you think a doctor should have to do other things that believe against their personal beliefs? Do you think that as a doctor they should keep their religious views separate? Do you think that they should just find another doctor to help out the individual? How do you think a doctor should deal with it? Should we not have doctors that have religious beliefs then, when we're desperate for doctors, full stop? What again are your thoughts? Are spiritual values then just human values? Does religion actually bring anything of any value? Does Christianity bring anything of any value? Can you think of any Christian teachings that are just essential human values? Arguably then these values, so you might have thought things like compassion, forgiveness, justice, agape, are just human values, not specific Christian teachings. However, not all Christian values are so easily explained, such as self-sacrifice. So, for example, the Christian value of this idea of sacrifice, like what Jesus did, so a mother for a child or a soldier for his platoon, or unconditional love, like doctors and nurses who aid those in disease-stricken countries. Some of these Christian values are harder to explain than just your everyday compassion. Perhaps, therefore, spiritual values like the pure, perfect and untainted values are better than human values. So the spiritual ones you get from religion do actually add more to our life and understandings, rather than just the physical, sensual and morally corrupt human values. So the idea is that we are sometimes still led by greed and selfishness, and that actually we need the spiritual values to help us move beyond ourselves. God represents both spiritual and human values, so the incarnation through Jesus. So that's purely about the separation of what does the spiritual values of Christianity actually bring to human values. Would we have these without religion, or does Christianity give us more values on top of it? That's what that question is asking of you. Finally, the secularization theory. This is the belief that religious belief would progressively decline as democracy and technology advance. But question is, has this happened? So has religion gone down as democracy, people being able to make the free decisions about how their country is led, and technology has advanced? Has religion gone down? Luke Bretherton, in an interfaith lecture in 2009, talks about the reality of multicultural, multi-faith London in full bloom. He's basically arguing is no, it hasn't. Just because democracy and technology has advanced, religion is also in full bloom. Peter Burka, who doesn't he look like a Peter Burka, who contributed originally to the secularization theory in the 1960s, since retracted his earlier conclusions, saying that secularization on the societal level is not necessarily linked to secularization on the level of the individual consciousness. What do you think he means by that? Do you think he means that as a society we look like we're secular, but actually on an individual conscious level we might still class ourselves as religious? Or maybe vice versa. And finally, David Ford and Jose Casanova. David Ford was the one that gave you the two explanations within pluralism and society. It's the same David Ford. They are both quite critical of the idea that secular atheism is unquestionably good. They state that atheist ideologies such as fascism, communism and capitalism have sought to write out religion from civilization. Is it really a good idea to write out religion? So the question that you are then left with is secularization a good thing or not? Now, with the slides that you have multiple different views, like the 3 there for secularization theory, like the 4 that you've got defending the schools, you only need 1 or 2. You don't need to learn all of the different names. My recommendation is learn the 1 or 2 that you can actually engage with, as in, do you agree or disagree with them? So you don't need to have all of them. I'm just presenting the different views. You can pick and choose the ones you want to use in your essay, the ones you can evaluate and engage with. Right. Hopefully you've made full notes through all of that. Hopefully you've wrote down your own thoughts and considerations from the different parts. Please do make sure you watch the different clips as well, because they are really important, because this is a real topic that you can get involved and engaged with within an exam. But the only way of doing that is by making sure that you cover all the different elements and really think about what it is that your view is in relation to these different arguments. Right, thank you very much, everybody. I will see you all back at college in a couple of weeks' time. Enjoy your half-term break as well. And thanks for stopping by. Bye, everyone. Bye.